Good morning, friends. Hopefully you can hear our farm manager. He's letting us know things to be done. Things need to be done out here. So hope you are having a great day. It's been really rainy and cloudy and overcast here for days. Not particularly cold, but today the wind's out of the north, and but it's bright and sunny, so it's going to be a little colder today, I think. We had a great event at our farm yesterday. We had Val Nolen from Motherherbs Garden teaching a class on soil preparation and preparing your garden soils. So I'm going to show you guys some clips from that, and hopefully you find some good value in learning more about your soil preparations for great spring gardens. So let's check it out.
The most important part of your garden. This is the thing. If you don't get this right, nothing's going to be right. Of course, most of you know me well enough to know I only do organic methods. If you get organics going, is there anyone here who's not organic? Oh, I love it. Okay. I don't have to go through that spiel. Okay, because I have a good one if I have to use it. Okay, well, that sounded like mine.
Do you want to use it? Because I'll raise my hand if you want to use it.
Give us the short version.
The short version is chemicals and synthetics tend to kill off soil life fairly quickly. They're toxic. And if you kill off your soil life, your soil is not soil anymore, it's dirt because it's dead. So it's that simple.
Yeah.
So if you use it, that's what's going to happen. And then it becomes like pumping up yourself with steroids. It makes it better to begin with. But then, once that wears off, you're in worse shape than you started. And you got to pump up again, and it becomes this vicious cycle, and you don't have to have that. You know, nature can rejuvenate and come back around. Here, it's a little bit more challenging because we have very heavy-duty climate to deal with. Most of our soils are really heavy and clay. I tell people we live on Mars. We got a garden like we're on Mars. So our different rules apply to us than would Connecticut or California, you know, where all this great internet information comes from. A lot of it, unfortunately, will not work for us. So, but there are ways. We just have to adapt. What I try to do with this is the soil being the most important part. It is the foundation of everything. So it's the most expensive part of your garden. It's the most time-consuming and physically demanding part of your garden. But if you get it right, and over time, if you maintain it, that's the trick, maintaining it, it gets easier and easier and easier. Are any of you starting like brand new? Oh. Okay. That's all right. This works for you. The brand new part also applies to those of you that maybe had a garden and it got hot or something happened and you said, I'm not going out there anymore, and you gave up. If you gave up, it's kind of like starting over because two things probably occurred. One, you didn't water it. Nothing in the soil can live without moisture. And two, that probably didn't have a good layer of mulch on it. Now, it might have. I'm not saying it didn't. But the mulch will at least help protect the soil. And I use this theory, and it's a very easy one to test. If I had an old piece of board laying on the ground, and it laid there for a while because I was doing other stuff. And I finally said, I really, come on, I'd clean up the yard. I'd pick up that piece of board. If I picked up that piece of board, underneath there would be life. It would be moist. There would be bugs. There would be life. Whereas the ground right next to it most likely would be dry as a bone and there would be nothing there. So that in itself tells you something very clear about covering up your soil. If you don't mulch, I don't care. I use cedar mulch. That's the best for me. When it breaks down, it doesn't cause any biological boo-boos. There's a lot of mulches out there that come from far, far away, which doesn't make any sense to me why people would buy mulch from far, far away. But when you use that on our soil types, often enough as it breaks down, there is a biological reaction. And some of them are not positive. So I try to stay away from that. I like getting my materials close, so the footprint's smaller. And they're usually indigenous to our area, so there's less problems when the soil and it start to mix as one. So that's the deal with that. But if you don't cover soil in Texas when you're gardening, or even if you're not gardening, but that's the bed you're going to maintain, you shouldn't be gardening. It's really, really important here. I learned that the hard way. I came from New England when I worked at the Rodale Institute for a couple of years. I went to school up there and then eventually ended up in Pennsylvania and eventually came back here. This was home. They didn't mulch. You could throw stuff at the ground and it grew, you know. We don't live in that dream world. So anyway, the art of maintaining and building soil. First of all, I say this is, and if you look at the handout itself, you'll see this little underline. It says introduce, encourage, protect, and maintain. And those are the 4 steps. And if you do this for your soil, and think of it as a living organism, because it is. If it's healthy and will produce what you want, it's alive. Good compost is one of the first things on the list for the introduction. When you're buying compost or you're making compost, there are 2 factors in your compost pile, or there should be. The first one, of course, is organic matter. That's, you know, the stuff out of the kitchen, even stuff out of your lawnmower bags, leaves, anything, shredded cardboard, some people will use that, that's okay. Newspaper, that's okay, just stay away from the glossy and the colored stuff. So there's a lot of things you can use in your compost pile. David's become a master composter, but you want to stay away from the materials that, like the glossy paper. But the other half, that's organic matter, but the other half of what your compost should be is life. Should be good fungus, good bacterias, mycorrhizal fungus in there, microbial life. If that's not present, then you're only getting half your money's worth. So when you buy compost, if you're going to buy compost, smell it, feel it. Some people go get a truck full. Cool. Ask to see it. Go out there, put your hands in it, feel it, smell it. It'll give you some clues. If you are getting it in bags, you can look at what's in the bag. Often enough, there's a hole in one bag. You can just see it.
Or you will be.
Yeah, because you know, I've had so many people, like I'll be out of something or they'll say, I got it for $1.99, you know. Well, you look at it and I'm like, okay, it's a bag of rotting wood chips. That's not compost. So compost is a really broad term. And the good stuff will smell like a forest floor, and it will be moist, and it will have life, and it will have organic matter in it. If you're buying it off a pallet that's sitting in Home Depot's parking lot, yeah, probably still organic matter, but it's probably baked all of the life out of it. For those of y'all that have been to my place, I have my compost on a pallet tucked under trees, you know, so it gets shade. It's not out in the sun. So compost is such an important part of the way you amend your garden. The quality of it will dictate how well things are going to work. So be really picky. Smell it. I have people that taste it. I don't go that far. But, and you know, even manures. Like I'm so anal, and the people that distribute to me know this. In fact, I had one come out yesterday, and he was like, "You're my hardest customer." He goes, "But I learn more from you than I do anybody else because you ask me questions." He got a new compost blend, and he said, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, where did the manure come from? And he was like, comes through. He had the answer right off because he knew something was coming. He told me the dairy farm he gets it from. He's been out there. He's like, you know, he's like investigated it. I was like, okay, it's not coming off a feedlot in West Texas because I don't want manure off a feedlot in West Texas. No, it's not. Okay. You sure? He's scared of me, I think, just a little bit. But that's the quality that I look for. That's probably why I'm still in business, because I do dog them about the products. And stuff changes at my place because I'll go up, someone bought that company out, now they're not doing it the same way anymore. So we all know that too. When we buy something at a grocery store or anything, if someone's bought something out and it's totally changed. I did mention manures on here. Worm castings. I love worm castings. Fresh worm castings. People used to do the worm bins and all that. That's still great. But if you get fresh worm castings, there's earthworm eggs in there. They can't take them out. They look just like the worm castings themselves. But if the worm castings are fresh, they're still moist. When you put out the worm castings into your garden, which you don't need a lot of, and it's not a necessary aspect, but it is an introduction of something. It is introducing earthworms to your garden. Earthworms in your garden can amplify all of the minerals and all the things that are benefiting your garden up to 11 times. Their presence in your garden will do that for you. So they're really great to have, and if you have them, put the tiller away. Don't cutting them in half, they do not grow back. Okay. So a lot of people get too crazy. I'm very anti-till. Maybe in the beginning to get a bed built, you know, because they break through this topsoil we have out here. But after I've got that and I'm starting to mix things, the only thing I'll ever dig in it with will be a turning fork. And I just go in and flip it. You know, and I'm adding amendments later in next year, or I'm adding a little more compost between seasons to help my next crop. All the stuff you put in your garden, by the way, leaches away or is used by your plants. So you say, oh, I did all that. Well, yeah, but you grew stuff in it all year, or all summer. Now you're pulling that out and you're going to put in cold weather stuff. You got to add some stuff back in again. You got to replenish what was used up. So that's where maintaining helps. And also too, if you stay on top of it like that, it's not as big of an expense and it's not as time consuming. Yeah.
Is there a certain type of manure? Is it just cows, or do you want chickens, or, you know?
Well, they all do different things. Most of the manures you're going to find that you can buy in a bag will most likely be cow. But you can find a lot of fertilizers, like organic fertilizers, like I do mention some of these here, Texas tea. I used to use Ladybug. It burned down last year. We will not be seeing Ladybug again.
Oh.
Yeah, which is really sad. But there's like the new company that came out to talk to me, Silver Creek. I think their organic products are pretty good. I'm testing them now. And I'm probably going to start carrying them. I test everything before I commit to anything, aside from drilling their representatives. But they're, you know, those kind of things will have manures in them. Like they'll have a turkey-based manure, or they'll have rabbit. There was a company for a long time, Rabbit Hill,
Yeah.
which is this company right here. A lot of their fertilizers, they had different mixes for different things that I carry. Garden food for your garden, tomato and pepper food for your tomatoes and peppers, buds and blooms for your flowers. So those will have those kind of manures in there. Chicken manure is real high in nitrogen. Rabbit is too. So they're one of those things, if you're going to use them, it's not about digging a whole bunch in your garden because it'll fry it. You know, it's a very minimal usage. So I tell people, if you are going to use those products because maybe you have chickens, investigate that. Research that a bit. It probably might be better to throw it in your compost pile and let it break down for a while. What do you guys do with it?
Well, our chickens, and when you go out, if you go out to the fields and stuff, you'll be able to see our chickens are free range, so they have an electric poultry net around them. So we rotate them from section to section, and that section after they're there gets a rest period, so you don't plant directly in it. So it's got some time before we're planting in it. But our chickens are rotated across the field to add the fertilizer and the organic material.
Right.
But like she said, I believe if you plant directly in it right when the chickens have been there, it's just going to burn out. Nothing will survive it. But the fertilizer that they add to it is incredible.
And if you have access to fresh manures, again, I would really put them in a compost pile.
We do that too.
We do. We have another chicken coop that is stationary. It's not a chicken tractor. And every few months or so we'll clean it out, and then we'll put that directly into compost situations where it'll break down over months rather than we don't put it directly onto the plants or in the field.
Right. And I say that it's probably better for y'all because I don't think I don't know, maybe someone here has this kind of setup where you got this much space and you're rotating fields all the time, but I think a lot of us are just have our little plots, and that's what we're working with. So that was why I said it's probably better just to put it in the pile. So those are the ways to introduce things. Quality compost, you're introducing microbial life, good fungus, bacteria, all of that. If you're starting a compost pile, you've got to introduce that to your compost pile too. That's where you might have to go buy a bag of really good compost from someone like me that can guarantee that there's actually life in the bag. Because you've got to introduce that life. In the old days, I know when I did composting, which now I just don't have time and I could never make enough, we had 3 bins, big ones. And the first bin was, we'd get kind of full and start breaking down. It's like, okay, stop. We can't put anything else in there. Got to let it cook, and I'll start a next pile. But that one had been cooking for a while. So I'm like, I would take a shovelful or 2 of it and put it in the next one. Because I was introducing that life into the next pile. That's what's going to help stuff start to cook down. Now, piles get moist underneath and all that, so you usually have earthworms come in. And a lot of things because the moisture, like under the board, the life is there if it's moist. But I would keep those going, and then eventually, halfway through, I'm starting that 3rd pile. Same thing, I'm introducing, and then by then the first pile is really done, so I can actually dig it out and start using it on stuff. But that rotation was constantly going on. But if you don't have the space to be able to do that, it's better to at least have good compost or save some from the pile you got, however you want to do it, so you can do that introduction. And in compost piles too, there's a way to speed them up. Alfalfa meal and dry molasses. Dry molasses is sugar, it's carbohydrate, and microbial life has a party when it gets sugar. So they really start dancing around and multiplying rapidly. And alfalfa meal helps the pile heat up, and that's why it's a heavy nitrogen. That's why farmers use it a lot. They'll grow corn, and then after the corn crop comes in, then they'll throw alfalfa out. Now this is more in other parts of the United States than it is here, because alfalfa doesn't do well here, it's too hot. But in Pennsylvania and a lot of the farmland across, the Midwest, they throw alfalfa out after that. Alfalfa is a legume, and it fixes nitrogen back into the soil. Why does that happen? It's a chemical reaction, biological reaction. But it's necessary because corn sucks nitrogen like crazy. To have a good corn crop, you got to have nitrogen. So it's the way for a farmer to replenish constantly back and forth. Every plant has different needs. It's like people. That's why I carry a variety of foods too. It's not one food for everything. It's specific foods for specific things. Just like people are different. So anyway, all those introductions, worm castings, manures, quality compost, mycorrhizals, you can actually get mycorrhizals. Mycorrhizals is fungus.
Do you sell it?
I carry one for trees, and it's in a little packet. And what you need to know about mycorrhizals is probably the same thing you need to know about probiotics. If you buy a probiotic, and it's dry and it's hot, it's not alive anymore. Those cultures that are alive. You might have something in there, just like compost. It might still have the matter, but it doesn't have the life. I learned this from somebody who's very educated, because I do take probiotics. But they advertise there and everything. And he said if they haven't been refrigerated, maintained, if they haven't had the maintenance, just like the soil needs the moisture, they're probably not very active. With mycorrhizal, it's the same way. They have to be under the soil. You can't get a bag and throw it out on top. I had a huge fight with a distributor a couple of years ago about that. I'm like, there's no way that's working, because you're just throwing it on the top of the soil. You've worked with mycorrhizals before, right, Lori? Have you found any that you can put out on surface dry?
No.
Yeah. So don't let them fool you.
Well, it makes me think of yogurt, like when you said that. Like I get my probiotics from yogurt just because I know for a fact it's always been refrigerated.
Yeah.
So instead of taking a supplement, I just try to.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Both of our beds are full of mushrooms.
That's good.
Okay, I should go ahead and just tilt that
That's
in.
a fungus.
Yeah.
Everyone freaks about the mushrooms. It's like, no. And most, if you've ever had, now you don't want to eat them.
No.
No, you don't want to eat them. But a lot of times the manure that's in compost and stuff, it's cow manure,
Spores. Yeah.
and they grow it. It spores in compost all the time. So, or manures. So that's usually
Mushrooms
where
love
most
cow
time it
manure.
comes from. Huh?
Mushrooms love cow manure.
Yeah, they do.
I used to pick puffballs, and my dad would look for a cow pasture. And back in the day when there weren't fences everywhere,
Yeah.
and this was in New York also, but we would pick puffballs like that.
Oh my
And
gosh!
this deep. He had to slice them, and you could only cook one slice at a time
Yeah.
because they were so big.
I've never seen puffballs that big.
Oh, huge.
So you can eat puffballs?
Yes, we did.
Okay. You're still there. Did they taste good?
Yeah, oh yeah, they're wonderful.
Oh, good. That's a good thing to know. Okay. The puffball is one of those ones. There's not another one like it, so it's kind of works out like a morel mushroom. There's only one that looks like that. So we've done the introduction of things, all right, to get the soil life going. Now we need to encourage the soil life. We can't just throw it in there and say, okay, do what you're supposed to do. You gotta feed it. You gotta make it happy. You gotta, talk to it nice. You gotta do things for it. So that's where some of this stuff comes in. Dry molasses, like I just mentioned, it's a carbohydrate. And I always say molasses and compost are great dancing partners, because they really do a lot. Someone was mentioning that they thought or had been told that it brings in ants. It does not bring in ants.
My neighbors.
People get all freaked out, and that's the question I've dealt with for years. There used to be a product out there called, it was for ant control. Mound drench, that's what it was. There was liquid molasses in mound drench. And there was liquid molasses in it because hard-bodied insects like ants or beetles or things like that, they don't have a nose like we do. They breathe through their skin. So when they get coated with something like that, it smothers them to death. So if you use dry molasses, the only thing I'll tell you, and we'll get into it a little bit when I tell you the steps for building a bed real quick, you got to get it wet because then it dissolves. I had a dog that would eat it as fast as I threw it on the ground. So, he went in his yard when I put it out, and afterwards I would get it all wet because once it's dissolved, it's not accessible anymore. So that's a good one. Humate. Humic acid, oh my gosh, I'm all over this. I have my rounds, I'm always all over this, but I put this up here to let people see it. This stuff, it looks like these tiny granules, but look at the black that leaves on your hand. It's only a few steps away from coal. It's the most dense, heavy compost in the world. It's mined, like coal. It's 70% humic acid. That is the building block of all life. I use this once a year. Don't use it all the time. But you don't want to go crazy. In fact, for most things, as in life with everything, too much of a good thing isn't necessarily a good thing. So you need to be aware of how much you need to use. But humic acid, or I should say humate, is something you can spread out like chicken feed. You can do it anywhere. I do it everywhere. I do it all over my garden beds. I do it all over my yard. I do it everywhere. People that do organic lawn care, if they're really a great company, they apply this to your lawn once a year in their little regime. Reason being, humate will bind with our soil. Now, if you could look at our soil under a microscope, the particles are ginormous compared to a lot of other places. Now, we got 8 soil types in Texas. 7 of them are this heavy clay stuff. They might be different colors, but they're all that stuff. The only place it isn't is East Texas. And millions of years ago, we were an ocean floor. I think East Texas was a beach. That's my theory. But these heavy clay, hot, giant particles make it difficult for water to completely saturate and for air to be able to be in your soil. Air, literally, if you looked at the complete makeup of soil is 50% air. But here, that number might be quite a bit lower because we have this clay that sticks. And part of that is because when it gets wet, it doesn't pass through the entire particle. It usually gets the outside wet, and then they all start sticking together. And they're heavy. That's another aspect of our soil, is heavy. So that even compresses it and makes it worse. Humate will bind with your soil and break it down to about 1/10 of its normal size. It takes about 3 weeks and moisture. So it's best applied this time of year when we got some rain happening. or in the fall. But again, you only need to do it once a year. It will allow water to be better used because it will saturate the entire particle now. The particles are much smaller, so there's a lot more air between things, which is great. When you pick up your soil, you'll know it's done because it'll start to feel like coffee grounds. It's amazing. So it's one of those things I tell people you should do it everywhere. Because if nothing else, like if you gotta turn on your sprinklers to water something, and this is present already, that water's gonna go a lot further. That's why they use it when they do this lawn maintenance. And it is a mild food because of the humic acid. It builds, it encourages, I should say, the life of your soil to really be active as well. Because it's one of their building blocks, that humic acid. So it's an amazing product, and it goes really far. I got little bags out there, and I brought 2 of my medium bags. But the medium bags, it's 15 pounds. It'll cover like 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, depending on what you're doing. That's a lot. So, humate. One of the encouragers. Alfalfa, that actually activates microbial life. And as far as even an amendment for your garden, it has a natural growth hormone in it called tectonanol. So it does help plants. It's one of the things I use on my beds regularly for that purpose. Again, here we can't really grow alfalfa, but the dried alfalfa will work. It's water soluble. And it's in a lot of fertilizers too.
So Val,
Yeah,
is there a formula for how much of the stuff you use?
we'll get to it.
Oh,
In fact,
okay.
you got a whole list right in your hand.
All right, okay. Sorry.
I put it in there for you. I want you to have that kind of information. Expanded shale encourages life. And people go, well, it's just rocks. Have anybody here use expanding shale? Okay. You guys like it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do you see a difference when you use it?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Expanded shale looks like gravel. And when you pick it up and hold it, and it's dry, it's really light. So I'm gonna pass this around and let people feel it. But it will hold 4 times its weight in water when it passes through your soil. Now people say, okay, what does that do for me? Well, a lot of people put peat moss and stuff like that in their soil mixes. Oh, that's terrible. Peat moss will absorb a lot of water. When you buy those little plants at the grocery store, they're in peat moss. That peat moss is wet, but that doesn't mean that the plant's getting any water from it. Because peat moss doesn't release water. Now, the peat moss my grandmother did. It was gooey, black, stringy stuff. It was real, it was alive, it was a living peat bog. Those are gone. They don't exist anymore. When you buy peat moss at a store, you pay a lot of money for a big dry bale that is wasting your money and will make you think things are wet when they're not. So stay away from peat moss. I stay away from peat moss in every form. I don't sell potting soils with any of it in it. I don't sell soil mixes with any of it in it, compost with any of it in it. It's useless. It didn't used to be, but it is. Things have changed. So instead, I use this. I add about 2 inches to garden beds, and if I'm doing containers, I'll do the same thing for my mixes. Every bit of water that passes through that isn't used, instead of it just going away, this will hold on to it for you. And it will allow the plants to have it when it needs it. So if you use the recommended dosage in your mix, and it needs to be mixed in, you can't just throw it on the top, it will allow your water to go a lot further. If you use it in containers, it's really obvious. The first time I was ever told, I was working for a nursery, and the woman who owned it brought this, said, oh yeah, we're going to be selling this. And I was like, I looked at Vicki and I said, we're going to sell people rocks? And she and I both had the same theory in the concept of we can't do this morally in our heads unless we know if it works or not.